The MVP award in the NBA is officially a joke, and it's kind of ironic because the guy who made it a joke is nicknamed the Joker, which is kind of funny. But very recently, we all found out that Nikola Jokic won his third MVP in the last 4 years, and a lot of people feel a lot of ways about it, and I'm one of those people. Today, we're going to be talking about that a little bit, but you guys already know what I'm about to ask you guys to do. I need you guys to hit that like and subscribe button for more content. Trying to make sure as many people find this channel as possible, and the only way I'm going to do that is with you guys' help. A lot of people would make the assumption or the assertion that Steve Nash was the first person to make the NBA MVP award a joke, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, but Steve Nash didn't win MVP for maybe like 8 or 9 years or so, and when he won the back-to-back, a lot of people had a lot to say about it, and
maybe they were right.
I wasn't necessarily a huge basketball fan at the time, so I don't necessarily have a lot to say about it, and it's been, 15 or 16 years or so since that MVP award, and I think we've kind of been consistent for the past 16 years or so in terms of who won MVP. So I'm not going to make that assertion about the Steve Nash one, even though it's kind of ironic because he got 2 MVPs. Kobe got 1, Shaq got 1. A lot of people have 1 MVP, and it's just ironic to me how a little Steve Nash running point guard or whatever, averaging maybe something like 18 or 19 points a game and like 11 or whatever assists, was MVP 2 years in a row. So that's kind of ironic, but I don't want to get too much into that. A lot of people try to make ethnicity or race argument in terms of that, and I'm not even going to make that argument.
It seems unnecessary.
I think it's low-hanging fruit, and I'm not even gonna go there. Nikola Jokic to me is one of the 3 best players in basketball, and obviously I don't necessarily have him number 1 right now. I have Giannis at number 1, I have him at number 2, and I have Luka at number 3. And you know what, just for the hell of it, I got Shai Gilgeous at number 5, and I got Joel Embiid at number 4. So just to round out my top 5 there. I'm by no stretch of the imagination am I making this video because I think Nikola Jokic isn't a great basketball player. I think he's an all-time great basketball player. I just don't necessarily think he was deserving of this MVP this season, because one of the reasons that Giannis doesn't have 3 MVPs, and the first year that Nikola Jokic won his MVP was a year that Giannis finished number 2. And the reason Giannis finished number 2 was the narrative at the time was that Giannis wasn't necessarily doing much different from the first 2 MVPs, and if it was close, they were going to default to giving it to the guy who hadn't won one yet.
Which makes sense.
I think that is something that could be made a case for this season as well, as to why I believe personally that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander should have won the MVP award. I don't necessarily see Jokic doing a lot differently in this season, or having done a lot differently this regular season in particular than he was doing in prior regular seasons. And the fact that they had already given him the MVP award a third of those season end is kind of ironic to me, because I 100% believe that a lot of people were really upset about last season and how the MVP award kind of shook out, because I think it was Kendrick Perkins was the first person who brought up the whole ethnicity argument about how Jokic was winning MVP and Embiid hadn't won one at all yet, so they gave it to Embiid.
I don't know the criteria no more. I don't know if it's because it's the number 1 seed. I don't know if it's the number 6 seed. I don't know how you judging it. Is we judging off of advanced stats, or who's the most valuable player? You take them off this team. We don't know. We don't know, but we do know this. Since you do want to bring it up, we do know this, that when it comes to MVP voting, 80% of the voters are white American.
But I think a lot of people had that bad sour taste in their mouth of that being said,
Which is understandable.
and they had already decided coming into this season that Jokic was going to win MVP, and I think that's exactly what ended up playing out in the polls. And I think it's pretty annoying to me that they don't disclose who all these voters are, because I think all of us need to really know and understand who all of these voters are, so we can know exactly where to direct our anger in terms of these awards. But it is what it is. Kobe got 1, Shaq got 1, Steph Curry has 2, and now Nikola Jokic has 3. That's kind of weird to me, because the insinuation that you're making, especially when you give someone like Nikola Jokic 3 MVPs, and obviously we can make the case that Moses Malone isn't as great a player as any of those guys that I mentioned before either, but the insinuation that you're making is that Nikola Jokic is on the level or better than the players that I just named.
That is false.
Steph Curry only has 2 MVPs. Let's think about that. Kobe only has 1 MVP. Shaq only has 1 MVP. Are we really saying that Nikola Jokic right now is a better player than all of the 3 guys that I just mentioned?
Seriously though, think about it.
That's really ironic to me, how you guys can just give a dude this MVP award and say that his analytics were the greatest ever, and he was doing this, the effective field goal percentage and his offensive win shares or whatnot. What you're saying by that, and please give me a break on the whole analytics argument. This shit is nonsense to me. The eye test tells you that he's a great offensive player. So what you're saying when you're quoting all those nonsensical analytics or whatever is that Nikola Jokic is the greatest offensive player ever, and that offense is the only legitimate criteria toward defining who the MVP is, because Shai Gilgeous was probably the best player in the league on offense this year and one of the 3 or 4 best players in the league on defense this year. If you're making the analytics argument for Jokic as to why he won this MVP award, you're essentially saying defense in the NBA doesn't fucking matter whatsoever, which is ridiculous. Let's put this into proper context, okay? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was averaging 30 points a game on 54.5% shooting, I believe, from the floor. Last time I checked it might have been a little lower at the end of the season because he wasn't playing as many minutes, and I think they were going to try to rest him or whatever. But he was averaging over 53% shooting from the floor for the entire season. He was averaging the league-leading number in steals on defense, which is one of those stats and one of those metrics that we all pay attention to in terms of defense. So he's a great guard defensively, and he led his team to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, which happens to have Nikola Jokic's team on it as well.
Let that sink in.
Let's even put in a proper context the fact that Jokic also has more talented players around him. And you know what? Let me not even say he has more talented players around him, because I do think Oklahoma City's future is a lot brighter. He has more refined talent around him. Let's say that's, I think, the better term for it, because what's his name? Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are going to be future all-stars in the NBA, so I'm not going to say he has more talent around him right now, but let's put that into proper context. Jamal Murray is a refined NBA talent. There's a lot of guys that know their roles in the Denver Nuggets offense, and Nikola Jokic is obviously the engine that drives it. So again, I'm not trying to make any assertion that Nikola Jokic isn't a great player. I think he had a wonderful season, but I also thought Luka had a better season than Nikola Jokic. If you want to make the analytics argument or whatever and his efficiency or whatever, Luka was averaging 34 points a game, 11 rebounds a game, and almost 10 assists a game. He was nearly averaging a triple-double.
What more do you want?
You could have given it to Luka as well, because Luka doesn't have one. Are we saying here, let's be clear, Luka has no MVP awards? Are we saying Nikola Jokic is that much better than Luka Doncic to where he has 3 of them to Luka's 0? Like, make this make sense to me. I just brought that up because I don't want people to think this is some sort of ethnicity argument at all, because I'm not making that argument at all. Nikola Jokic is a great player. Luka, to me, was having the better season of the two if you had to pick one, essentially because you guys have said in the past, like I mentioned earlier in this video, you guys have said that if it's that close in terms of who you guys think is going to be the MVP, if a guy has 2 MVPs already, he has to be doing something so much better than everybody else to where you have to give it to him, or you have to default to giving it to the guys who don't have one.
Be consistent.
There were 2 guys in the running for MVP this season that have no MVPs whatsoever, but you still gave it to Nikola Jokic, who is, for all intents and purposes, a liability on defense. And you can tell he's a liability on defense by the guys that he goes against at his position who are comparable in terms of talent. The Anthony Davises of the world, the Giannis's of the world, and don't even get me started on how much Joel Embiid cooks this motherfucker every single time they play. Even though I will make the case that Joel Embiid does kind of dodge playing in Denver a little bit, so I'm not going to big up Joel Embiid too much in terms of that, but he does kill him every time they play, and Jokic really looks like he has no answers for those guys. Now, I'm going to say in his defense, Jokic does give it right back to those guys, so I'm not going to say that he's just getting cooked and they're locking him up on the other end. He's a great offensive player, and again, he is a all-time great player.
Without a doubt.
You cannot put him past the class of a guy like a Kevin Durant or past the class of a guy like a Giannis by giving him his 3rd MVP award, because he only has 1 championship. And last I checked, Kevin Durant has 2, even though I don't necessarily respect those 2. We're going to have that discussion another day. But Giannis has 1, KD has 2 championships. Both of those dudes have less MVP awards than Nikola Jokic at this point in time. So it's just like, what are we saying here about the NBA MVP award? Is it just going to not matter? Because that's what you guys are doing. You guys are literally pushing it towards obscurity right now, because
it doesn't make sense.
A lot of people are really, really upset about the fact that this dude has 3 MVPs, and I'm with them. I think Shai Gilgeous had the best case for MVP this season, no matter what anybody says. He took the youngest team in the history of basketball to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, and you guys are still saying that Nikola Jokic, who has had a championship team around him, 1, has a championship coach around him, 2, has the continuity of that team around him, 3, you're saying that he was having a better season than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who actually plays on both ends of the floor? Come on, give me a fucking break, and don't say anything to me about those nonsensical analytics anymore with these nerds who are talking about the effective field goal percentage and the defensive or offensive win shares and his whatever the fuck that nobody understands anyway.
Just stop it!
I'm going to close out this video by saying this, guys. I'm going to need a more compelling argument than fucking analytics for why Nikola Jokic won 3 MVP awards, and guys like Shaq, guys like Steph Curry, guys like Kobe only have 1. Steph Curry only has 2. Guys like Giannis only had 2, especially when you said that Giannis couldn't win his 3rd one because he was either didn't have the super success in the playoffs or he wasn't doing anything more spectacular than what he'd been doing in his prior 2 MVPs. And let's keep in mind, I'm going to say this again, Giannis's 3rd MVP was the 3rd MVP that I think he should have won was the year that Nikola Jokic got his first MVP, which I didn't think he deserved at all. They were a 6 seed in the Western Conference, and he was averaging like 25 or 11 or whatever. I'm going to put the stats up for his 3 MVP seasons, and I'm going to put them up against Giannis's 2 MVP seasons, but the 1 MVP season that Jokic won over Giannis, and I'm going to put that comparison there just for you guys to know.
It's ridiculous.
So let me know in the comments down below, guys, what do you guys think about this whole MVP argument? This shit is really upsetting to me, and I'm, again, not going to make the racial argument. It's low-hanging fruit, but I need a reason as to why Nikola Jokic has 3 MVPs and those other guys I've named have less than 1, and it's going to be even crazier to me if this motherfucker wins a 4th MVP. Yo, what you're then going to be saying is he's the caliber of a LeBron James. He has to be capped right now at 3 MVPs. I don't care what anybody says. He has to be capped at that. He's a terrible defensive player. Again, let me know in the comments down below, guys, what you guys think about all of this. Again, as always, I want to thank you guys for joining me on this video because you guys could have been anywhere else in the world, but you chose to be here with me, and I really do appreciate you.
If you liked what you heard today, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you didn't like what you heard, thanks for watching the whole video. Consider leaving a comment in the comment section and telling me exactly what you disagreed with. Either way, thanks for joining me on this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.